discussion on industrial real estate in 2025. As an investor and entrepreneur, the hardest thing we do is forecasting the future, trying to predict where things are going. This becomes even more difficult when underlying assumptions about behavior of people and markets are being challenged. We've spent 35 years managing a little more than $200 billion in logistics businesses that were undergoing a lot of change and undergoing disruption. There's always some external factor that precedes this disruption. It doesn't matter whether it's airlines or it's utilities, there's always something that precedes the disruption. It can be regulatory, it can be environmental, it can be technology, labor, consumer buying patterns, or something else. But there's always a catalyst. There's a tipping point that accelerates that transformation. The hardest thing, though, is predicting where the puck is headed. It's even tougher when making really long bets, and that's what this group is doing. We're making really long bets on warehouses. It's tough to move a warehouse, and it's tough to transform a warehouse once you've committed to it. So these are long bets. Fortunately, today, we've got some of the best and most knowledgeable industrial real estate folks on our panel to talk about this. And we'll be really, I'm very interested to hear what they have to say. 4 years ago, I traveled around the country with Secretary Pritzker, having town hall sessions with stakeholders within our ecosystem, within the supply chain ecosystem. And we heard one big theme: give us data and visibility. We'll do the rest, but we're flying blind without data and visibility. Now, 4 years later, the same thing is what I'm hearing from this conference and these sessions. So let's roll into our panel, and I'll let them make quick introductions. So I'm going to start with Randy. And Randy, can you briefly share a bit about yourself and Xebec? And then also, Randy, if you could, tell us one lesson that you've learned about your business as a result of the pandemic.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm Randy Kendrick. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Xebec, which is a build-to-core asset manager, national build-to-core asset manager, focused exclusively on the logistics space. I started about 35 years ago. I'm right out of USC, and very much love my business and love being a Trojan. What I've learned, it's been an interesting 6 months since March, when the two black swans landed concurrently, which was COVID and the oil fight between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And we really didn't know what was going to happen. And like any other economic externality, there were a lot of things that we thought might happen didn't, and a lot of things we had no idea would happen did. And I think that the one thing that we know for sure that came out of the pandemic is a very large group of consumers that may have never shopped online, learned how to shop online because they had to. Thank God e-commerce was invented, because if this would have been a situation where we were taking turns at a Sears store, that would have been, it would have been a lot worse than what we dealt with. So we should all be thankful that technology allowed the emergence of the internet, and the internet allowed the invention of e-commerce, because I think it saved a lot of lives. So what we've seen is a very noticeable acceleration of especially Amazon to take more market share. We just signed another lease with them yesterday. We've done well over 2 million square feet in the last 6 months with just that occupier. And to give you a sense of how dominant they are, you have to add up the next 6 occupiers to equal the square footage they've absorbed so far this year. So they're working hard to be, well, they are the dominant player, and they're working hard to cement that position, but there's a lot of other people that are playing catch up. So that's the thing that came out of the pandemic for me, is that a very large, the baby boom generation, which is between 20 and 25% of the population in America, that probably would have not, a big percentage would never shop online. It really did. So it basically accelerated trends that were already in place. The year-over-year sales. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say, and that's exactly what what we've seen in industry after industry. That there's already something going in a certain direction, and then there's this catalyst. And so let me move to Craig. We got a lot more to talk about, Randy, and we'll be back to you. But Craig, tell us a little bit about your role at CBRE and
really?
what you see.
CBRE, Jonathan?
Well, I just did that to throw you off.
You want to see if I was listening? Look, first of all, thank you for including me.
Yeah.
And welcome everybody.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people online. And I've heard this has been a great conference so far. We've got a lot of downloads and a lot of interesting information. So a little bit about me. I work for JLL, not CBRE. I'm president of JLL Industrial, so I'm a group or sector lead for that asset class for our company. That includes brokerage, which means tenant rep, agency, which is our definition of representing landlords, capital markets, the sale and financing of properties, and then property management. And so, and JLL is a Fortune 200 company, so pretty good size and good purview around that. Your question you asked me, Jonathan, is what were the lessons that I learned from them? I'll give you kind of a generic one, but I think it's really applicable to anybody in business today, was the importance of being about communication. We've been challenged in a way that we've never have been before to communicate among ourselves and with our clients. It's a thoughtful process. As we're doing it today, we've learned a lot. And if you think about it in the broad spectrum, it's really a challenge for the human race, which is a very social species. We like to be together, and we're kind of in this artificial environment today. So to me, it's about thinking about how do we communicate and maintain those connections, both professionally and personally. So that's kind of a broad thing. Listen to what Randy was saying. I'm going to echo that. We came into this with some big trends already in play. And the way I would characterize it would be, it's like a leap year. But we had like 3 leap years in a row in 6 months. So adoption of online purchasing across a variety of lines. Think about online grocery, think about first time buyers online, all that's increased tremendously. And that has a broad fundamental change in about industrial real estate, but more broadly about how the American consumer or the global consumer buys and expects products today. It used to be, we see you walk through the storefront. Well, today, you're expecting it to be delivered on your front porch. And just one last thing on that is, all of you in the supply chain world talk about service requirements and delivery. And just think of the enormity that it takes to have products delivered to all the single family residents across the United States overnight. And I would say that the resilience of the US supply chain and all the people that are in this audience is nothing less than remarkable. We came through a catastrophic pandemic. We were challenged in ways that we've never been challenged before. And honest to God, we performed beautifully. So people may have hoarded a little bit of toilet paper. It may have been hard to get an extra case of Coca-Cola, but by and large, everything that people needed came to them at their homes in a pretty seamless way.
Craig, thanks. And my apologies for getting the reference wrong. As you know, we have a big relationship with JLL, and we're enormously appreciative as a firm.
Jonathan, I'm not going to let you off the hook. I'm never going to forget this.
I know. I knew that when the words came out of my mouth, I thought, oh shit.
Well, which is good for me.
Never going to forgive me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this means there's a lot more business coming our way.
Yes, exactly. In fact, double that.
Sorry, Jay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kent.
Exactly. Well, Kent, you want to talk a little bit about your experience at Cushman?
Sure, Nick. Thank you very much for the invitation. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I would echo what my fellow colleague said. I think that when this event or events happened, a lot of people might have taken the attitude of the Marine Corps: improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I think that's what we have done as a country, what we've done as a society, and what we've done as an industry. How the different real estate firms have come together: Randy's firm, Craig's firm, Jay's firm, our firm, and really we became more of than a service provider. We partnered with the folks that we were doing business with in the truest sense of the word, and I think we had some shared goals of trying to get out of this pandemic alive and together. So thank you for the listening audience. I think we as a group, if we can provide anything, we can get some top of mind topic that we discussed today, something that got you very interested that you could take back to your classroom or to your team meeting Monday morning, and a tangible takeaway. So thank you for having me, Jonathan.
No, thank you. And now, CBRE, Jay, you want to say a little bit about where you're, what you guys are up to, and then, a lesson that you think you've learned as a result of what we've all been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. Jay Dick, Executive Vice President with CBRE. I've been over 30 years in the Inland Empire focusing on big box. It's been my specialty. We've been crazy busy. Huge lift, obviously, especially in e-commerce with the pandemic. Some numbers we just got yesterday, I was on a call. They said e-commerce sales were up 44% the quarter after the pandemic, becoming 20% of all retail sales, and they think 40% of Christmas will be e-commerce this year. Randy was talking about Amazon earlier. We're showing Amazon has leased 58 million square feet year to date. Huge. Now it's like, it might be more than 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 put together. Personally, we've had a client in the e-commerce sector that wanted to double their North America footprint just this year. So we've been extremely busy. So what we've learned, huge lift in e-commerce. Thanks. Yeah,
I think that's that's consistent across the board. I think we're all seeing that. And then our 3PL, we spent a lot of time. We have a 3PL called Tailored Services, and it really does a lot of apparel. And with the stores closed, the warehouses are just busting at the seams because you couldn't stop the inventory from coming in. So our guys are all complaining about where do they put the stuff. Jessup, what's going on at Boeing?
Hey, well, yeah, thanks. And first off, just want to appreciate, being invited to participate as part of this panel. And I lead corporate real estate for Boeing, and, really coming at this from a user perspective. And, I think from a Boeing perspective, even preceding the pandemic, we had some commercial challenges in the commercial airline space, and then that compounded with COVID. And I think from a corporate real estate perspective, whether it's feast or famine, it generates significant activity in the real estate space. And I think what this really surfaced for us is rethinking our demand profile, whether that's on the office front or in the supply chain footprint, and really exposed for us really that need for flexibility around capacity. Because as our line rates are changing, we sell big things, big products that have big components, and that really has a ripple effect through the supply chain, and our ability to flex our capacity has been challenged. And secondly, we have a very fragmented distribution footprint. So it's really causing us to rethink our strategy and how we can really leverage our scale and really look at our model which is a mixed model between in-source and outsource as well. So there's a lot of variables that we're working to pull together to really drive more efficiency and being able to respond in a time that we really need to as an enterprise.
Thanks, Jessup. Ravi, what's happening at Intel? What are you guys thinking about, and what did you learn?
Yeah, how much time do you have? Hey, Jonathan, it is a pleasure to be here with you and the guys. So first, I'd like to say that, you know, everything has been upended in our lives from a supply chain standpoint and even a personal standpoint, right? But the difference between 9/11 or GFC or, you know, the port slowdowns is, you know, COVID's impacted everyone, right, and everything. So, you know, on a personal level, my heart goes out to everyone that's been impacted. And I wanted to say I'm really proud of the organization I work for that's pledged $60 million to fund COVID relief this year. And also a shout out to my colleague Shaheen for receiving a Women in Leadership Award from Nick this morning. You know, as most of you know, Intel's a $72 billion company, 110,000 employees, 45 countries. So footprint's extremely important to us. You know, you're probably thinking, what the hell is a logistics guy doing on this panel, right? So my role as head of strategic programs for my group is to find new ways to partner, harness capabilities, optimize our logistics supply chain, right? So sometimes that means crossing boundaries from traditional ownership, if you will. You know, I think, you know, some of the things that we've learned in areas that have resonated with me is, one, the need to really enable the right capability at the right time. And that's something that doesn't happen, you know, by accident, right? You can't build those muscles during a pandemic. You have to have been working on those muscles during the downtime. So, you know, if you want to be good at, you know, business contingency planning, you know, it needs to be part of your existing culture and not just a check mark in a box, right? So luckily for Intel, being a manufacturer with deep engineering roots, this is something that we've always lived by. So again, that need to enable the right capability at the right time. Two other things I wanted to touch on. One is the investments we and others made in ensuring a really deep understanding and visibility within the supply chain, as well as having supply chain modeling capabilities really paid off. And I know that's been tough for some supply chain teams to, you know, state that value case historically. We were lucky enough to be able to influence our stakeholders and move forward with that. And, you know, having the capability to, you know, model out hundreds, if not thousands of what if scenarios as efficiently as possible is something that, you know, enabled us to have a resilient supply chain. So that investment that was made was really important. And the last piece is people first, right? So, you know, supply chain, you know, we've been running on adrenaline, fueled by people, right? And companies that have historically put people first, in my opinion, have been leaders in that resiliency, right? So we should continue to acknowledge, you know, all the extraordinary efforts of all of those talented folks in the ecosystem. So, yeah.
Great, thanks, Ravi. So there's a consensus view here. You know, we've all talked about it, you know, in our prep for this panel. And I want you to make an assumption. I think we all believe this, but let's make an assumption so we don't have to argue about it. That COVID really has been a tipping point, and that there's been a permanent shift in channel distribution, right? So you know, depending on who you listen to, pre-COVID, you know, we had somewhere between, let's call it 10 and 15% internet you know, fulfillment. So online fulfillment. You know, we're probably sitting today well above 40%. And it, you know, I think the consensus view is it'll settle down in kind of the 30 to 40 range. But that's permanent. I mean, that's a permanent shift. That we're not going to go back. You know, they're closing malls. So Randy, you know, you're a pretty smart guy in the warehouse business. What are you going to do to pivot, especially when you've got those long bets? Randy, you're on mute, maybe. Yep.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
We started pivoting probably 7 years ago. And we started focusing and thinking about our business, when I got into this business in 1986, it was industrial real estate. We don't view our role in this real estate sector as an industrial company. We're a logistics company. We're focused on evolving technologies that are disrupting old supply chains and old habits, and which you focus on all the time, Jonathan. And we could just see the handwriting on the wall that e-commerce was going to replace retail, and we've had this catalytic moment that just accelerated that in a very, very big way. So when I look out in the next 5 years, and one of your talks was, what's it going to look like in 2025? I think a lot of real estate that was used in certain ways will no longer be, and will be the business of repurposing malls and other retail properties will become a big business. Not a business we're going to be engaged in, but will be a big opportunity for someone. In the logistics space, we're going to see the continued evolution of inland port logistics clusters. And so when you've got, it's all about infrastructure. And when you have, an international intermodal in a place like Atlanta or Dallas, Fort Worth, or Columbus, Ohio, there's a lot of things that is also a catalyst for. And one of them is the flow of international containerized cargo, which carries finished consumer goods. That's the raw input to fulfillment. It's like iron ore to a Ford plant back in 1930. So today, I think we will continue to focus more and more and continue to be participating in the evolution of these logistics clusters in these inland port markets, where the efficiency of rail bringing finished consumer goods is an undeniable driver of demand. And we'll try and locate facilities in ways that it reduces transportation costs. Because in some of these markets that heretofore were not constrained markets. Now I started in Los Angeles. LA is a constrained market. And so too is New York and New Jersey. But when you get outside those gateway markets and you get the inland ports and where you don't have the mountains and ocean constraining the amount of land you have. So historically you could overbuild it by just moving further out. Now we're getting these concentrated clusters around here in Dallas. We've got the BNSF up in Alliance. We've got UP down in South Dallas. So I think those clusters will continue to evolve as well with manufacturing. So, and that's one of the other things that I definitely see in the logistics space. One of the big drivers, technological drivers, I think, this year we will start seeing driverless yard mules in the truck courts of our big buildings. It's already evolving, the technology here. Waymo just announced South Dallas is the home for their driverless truck evolution. And for those of you who don't know who Waymo is, that's Google's self-driving vehicle company. So all those things are coming fast. But at the same time, I think high-tech manufacturing is going to come back to the country. I think our country's outsourcing of some critical supply chains was the other thing that was really exposed in this pandemic. We can't have another country making all of our medicine. And there are critical things to the national defense of the United States that we need to have that manufacturing here. And the other thing is, the United States is a great brand, and we need to be, take a page out of Germany's playbook and make really valuable stuff and export it to the world. And if we start doing that, you can pay good, solid wages to the people who learn to operate the machinery and use that productivity of a machine. So I think that we're going to see e-commerce is easy to see that outcome. I think the reshoring of valuable manufacturing back to the United States is the other big thing that we're going to see.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you mentioned something that's sort of near and dear to my heart, which is driverless vehicles and yard hostlers, and things like that in these complexes, and the need for, the convergence of technology with real estate. I mean, it becomes one, particularly geospatial intelligence about where things are and how they're moving. And it's so integrated. You can't have one, one without the other. But Craig, I listen to you guys at JLL. I listen to you and your colleagues, and I'm hoping that a year from now or 2 years from now, I don't have to come to you and tell you you cost me a bunch of money, because you convinced me that we are going to change our supply chain, and things are going to shorten. Things are going to be more responsive. The supply chain needs to be more responsive, and you convinced me that 30% of the market's probably going to be on demand. What do you see when you talk to your customers? You must be getting some vibe from them about the commitments they're making and the flux that we have. I mean, it's hard to go out there and plunk down money for a 1 million square foot DC in Ontario when you're not sure exactly where you're going to be, where you're going to need capacity. What are you hearing? What are you hearing from your customers?
Look, I would tell you that, and Jay mentioned this before, we've never been busier than we are right now. Our supply chain consulting practice led by Rich Thompson is off the charts. Every American company is trying to rethink and reconfigure their networks. As I say, as we've pushed in on this, the service delivery on this into shorter and shorter, it's really causing people to reconfigure quite a bit. The other thing I tell you is, and I mentioned it earlier, that the time frame has been compressed. As I told you, things that have happened in the last 6 months have been incredible. And I think it's going to, we think that the long-term trends are going to go there. We did a study, just before COVID, that we anticipated a need for another 1 billion square feet of space. And frankly, we didn't incorporate some COVID adjustments and increases in safety stock, or do we think about the profound impact in B2B? This is just simply on B2C growth, and look, and it's manifesting itself right now. So what are the long-term trends that we see? One, I think we've accelerated online purchasing. That's here to stay. It popped up and it'll settle down. I heard some interesting stats, like in the second week of March, that 40% of all online grocery was first-time customers, and they had 40 million new customers. There were people that never had done that before. That's going to change that industry. That's driving the demand for cold storage. You mentioned technology. Look, we're all living in a world that is changing pretty quickly. What's the impact for us? For those of you who have never seen it, I would suggest why don't you Google supply chain city in Singapore? And that's kind of what the future is like. Multiple story high-rise buildings that can handle, 90-foot truck and trailer, dark warehouses where they're picked by robots. I think the idea of autonomous trucks, look, why don't you take a drive on Monday morning up the 5 freeway in the Central Valley, and I swear you'll see 1,000 trucks in line. Has that ever been designed for autonomous trucks? Obviously so. That's a train of trucks, if you want to call it that. So these are all things that are going to come into play. The other thing I would say that I think are going to be profound things that we're going to look at is twofold. One, you talked about monitoring things, the IoT of things. I think you're going to see warehouses that are going to be highly digitized, where you're going to find sensors everywhere. If a forklift operator happens to hit a post, the technician will come out the following day saying you hit post 37 and they register to, X amount of PSI. So we're going to take a look at that. And the other thing I would say is going hand in hand with technology, meaning the evolution of electric trucks, autonomous trucks, electric vehicles, is more concentration on what we would call human-centric design. And that means that you're going to see logistics parks that are going to offer better amenities for the employees. You're going to see, concerns about transportation, childcare, on-site, eating and health facilities as well. These are things that are coming rapidly into play, more than ever thought. And then lastly, I simply say, it's getting pushed deeper and deeper in the cities. Urban logistics is you know, as you need to get things closer to the people, you got to have buildings closer to them. And some of the largest leases signed ever in the United States were signed this year in the boroughs of New York, where you're talking about billion-dollar leases on million-square-foot buildings that are multiple story, that where the rents are approaching office building rents.
Yeah, well, we just saw that with our friends at LBA. You know, they just signed that big Amazon deal back in New York. A big deal. So there really is this you know, convergence of technology. Ken, are you on still, or you kind of went blank there? So,
Am I clear?
but let me just ask you, Ken, because you're focused, you know, here in a gateway market, Southern California, and you know, it is a constrained market, big time, and you know, we are. I mean, our trucking companies, you know, we own a bunch of trucking companies, and those guys are waiting 3 and 4 hours in line to get into terminals, and you know, it's I mean, frankly, the environmental impacts are you know, not pretty. But what do you see here in a gateway market, and does that translate, you know, across the board, or is it unique to a gateway?
Well, I think every gateway is going to have those constraint issues. I think part of the challenge is, and my colleagues have pointed it out, I want to say that, you know, 80% of the new product has been developed in the last 20 years. I mean, reverse that, 20% of the new product. So unfortunately right now, you don't have that situation where you can make the financial model work, right? So you say, okay, we're going to go into a mall and we're going to repurpose some of those big boxes for warehouse DC, if you will. But you know, the guy that financed the warehouse underwrote the rents at $1.50, not at 50 cents. So how does that? How do you make that work? And then the whole idea of second and third generation space that is 14-foot clear, 16-foot clear, highly unoptimal. And you would think if you could cobble those things together, tear it down, put up a new state-of-the-art building. The problem is we've had this high tide, and the high tide has risen all the boats. So not only has the Class A product gotten better returns, better yield, the Class C product got better returns and better yield. So we have to get past that tipping point. I think with regard to the whole logistics issue, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because as you pointed out, this pandemic has opened up some very fatal flaws. And if you want to call it decoupling, China plus one, whatever you want to call it, nearshoring, I think it's taught all of us that we have to have our medicine, our food, our necessities closer rather than further. And I also think that that's probably going to give rise to a couple other different product classes. Craig mentioned it earlier, temperature controlled. I think you're going to see a huge a lift in the temperature controlled space, and also with lab space, because as Randy said, we can't have China making all of our medicine. So, and I think a lot of that may play into the air cargo. I think the use and the utilization of air cargo is going to be better understood here going in the future.
You know, so thank you. Thanks for that. So when we think about that convergence of technology, and you know, the number of sensors, for example, I mean, this is just a sort of mind-boggling. The number of sensors that will produce data that are going to be distributed in the next, you know, 5 years is astronomical. I mean, the estimates are like 1 trillion sensors. We just ran across a company in Israel that's producing a sensor that provides location information, temperature, you know, a variety of things. It's 10 cents, and it's the size of a postage stamp. So when that starts happening, and everything that moves has some kind of connection to, you know, to the internet, and we've got 5G, what are we going to do? I mean, you know, you got to, how's that going to change, you know, what, you know, how we think about the business and how we think about, you know, making long-term bets. And Jay, you know, can you address that?
Well, that's the future. And yeah, if we can clearly see the future, then we can make some good bets and some good plays. But yeah, that's John, that's absolutely happening. Our clients are, every pallet, every item is got some sort of, going to have some sort of tracking, as well as the trucks, as well as, I mean, you know, we're talking forklift drivers. There's going to be automated retrieval, and it's already happening, obviously, with Amazon and some of the big warehouses. So yeah, the technology and how it's going to move product and supply chain is rapidly growing. And
Jay, are you seeing any difference between your customers who are more internet centric versus more traditional kind of legacy players that don't lean on the internet more, or is it all the same?
I think it's all the same. I think there's some legacy guys that are very advanced, and I think there's some e-commerce guys that are just reactive and doing it the old-fashioned way, if that makes sense. I don't think just because your platform is e-commerce means that you're warehousing. You know, Amazon obviously is at the front, but some of these other clients are just reacting to the huge increase that they've had in sales, and haven't incorporated technology as fast as the technology is available. Does that make sense? Yeah, but I think it's gonna, I think the way 5 years from now that a product moves from the manufacturer through the supply chain, through the warehouse to the consumer, I think it's gonna have huge changes. And we're just starting to see it, just to tip the iceberg, but I think it's gonna happen faster and faster. But some of the features that we're seeing in buildings to accommodate that, some of the slabs and the floors for the robotic retrieval, that's an ask. I'm starting to see more and more super flat floors. Obviously clear heights, when the robots are retrieving the product, they can go up higher and get it. So higher clear heights, flat floors. It's interesting. We're seeing a ton of low covered buildings because of employee and car parking, the parking, the truck parking. Are we going to need all this parking in the future? That's a great question. I've seen models that say, you know, when the certain aspects are going to be replaced by automation. So something to think about.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jessup, you know, Boeing has an interesting challenge. I mean, it's sort of bifurcated in that, you know, you're both a manufacturer, and so you have some predictability in terms of, you know, where you have inventory and how you need it and how you need to fill that supply chain. But you also have, and I know this from firsthand experience because we owned an aerospace logistics company, and we had airplanes all over the world, and you know, when something breaks, you've got to have inventory ready to go, because that airplane's sitting on the ground. So you have this bifurcated. You know, I assume you're also supplying you know, certificated equipment, you know, to fix airplanes, not only manufacture them. That's all about data, right? I mean, that's all about information. That's all about, you know, where's my stuff, and being able to respond quickly. Does that affect you at Boeing in terms of the kinds of facilities and where you place them? Are you guys thinking about that, or is that not really in the?
Yeah, absolutely. Because right now we have basically a split of our businesses between the commercial, defense, and then the MRO, and really looking, those businesses have, at least from a legacy standpoint, have operated fairly independently, which has really fragmented our distribution footprint and really suboptimized. And what we're looking at is how we can really take more of an enterprise approach. So this is kind of some of the basics, you know, getting back to how do we leverage our scale? How do we get more data to understand where our parts are and how we can drive synergies across our businesses to optimize that footprint. Because when we have parts that aren't showing up on time, it has big consequences, because we have these planes moving through positions that we need parts at certain points in that process. Otherwise, that backlog can be really catastrophic, and especially when we're potentially dealing with changeover as well. So yeah, the technology aspect and the data availability, and for us to understand where parts need to be when, especially when you have AOG or aircraft on the ground challenges, it's an extremely critical aspect for us to get sharper at.
Thanks. You know, Ravi, we're as an industry, sort of the supply chain ecosystem. You know, historically, we're not the most innovative bunch. You know, we're a little slow to react, and you know, we don't have data standards, and everybody kind of points fingers at, you know, who's screwing up the supply chain. But there's an interesting confluence with Intel, because you know, Intel's very innovative. I mean, you know, Silicon Valley is all about innovation. What do you see? What do you guys see? What's the advice from an Intel about how we, as an industry, supply chain ecosystem, how do we change our culture? What would you do?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, Jonathan. I've seen it from both sides, right? So I work for, you know, Intel, and I think we're, you know, highly proficient in certain aspects of our supply chain. Look, nobody's perfect, but, you know, I've seen some really amazing things during my time at Intel. Unlike the folks here at the Marshall School of Business, I started off in logistics in a completely different arena, right? I was driving forklifts and loading trucks. So I've seen the unsophisticated part of the industry. And I'll answer your question in different ways, but I think first and foremost, you know, COVID and this pandemic has been a huge shot in the arm for, you know, supply chain, right? So, you know, it is an unfortunate event that has had an impact for many, but in terms of supply chain and the importance of supply chain, I think it's elevated those teams to levels they hadn't previously reached. And, you know, from an Intel standpoint, as I think Shaheen mentioned in one of the previous panels, we report directly to the CEO, and that's how important supply chain is for Intel, right? And we manufacture transistors, right? Something like 10 billion transistors a day. So supply chain's really important. The other shot in the arm for e-commerce, and I'm going to segue a little bit, but the effects of e-commerce have actually kind of bled into the way people do business, right? So, you know, the usage and the adoption, you know, we've built a lot of expectations around the experiences that we get from e-commerce. So the ease in how we find product, how that service is delivered to us or enabled, right? And so these things are bleeding into what we're doing in the, you know, B2B area. So just on that tangent, I think in terms of what we're looking for in what I see in the future, I think some of that on-demand activity that you guys were talking about, I think that's going to be something that is going to be more and more interesting for enterprise customers in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't know if the capability is there today. That capability is servicing primarily e-commerce, and there's a lot of help that e-commerce needs because of how quickly that environment is ramping. But as on demand, whether it's trucking, warehousing, flex workspace, what have you, as those capabilities become more mature, I think enterprise customers are going to be looking at things in that arena. You know, in terms of look, what you know, advice or what do I see? And I'll look at this in terms of the audience that's here. So we've got, you know, recent college grads, people that are, you know, coming into the industry. We've also got folks that, as Kent mentioned, are going back to their teams on Monday with some takeaways. You know, the key for me is getting used to disruption, right? So, you know, I keep hearing about, you know, when are we going to return back to normal, and when are we going to get back to, you know, the previous state? And I think we need to stop asking that question. I think we need to, get used to disruption. You know, whether it's technology, it's infrastructure, capacity, really any kind of capability. Supply chains continuing to evolve, right? So, you know, Intel, you know, has and will continue to evolve as a company, as a supply chain. The industry will continue to evolve with all of this disruption that we're talking about that got a huge shot in the arm because of the recent pandemic. So, you know, adapting and finding alternative ways to be creative and get in that next level detail is key. And just, you know, on the technology side, you need to have in-depth visibility, right? So right now that's a differentiator, but I think for supply chains in the future, that's going to be a requirement. And if I'm a chief supply chain officer, I'd be looking at, you know, how deep of visibility I have within my supply chain end to end. And just a point of clarification, that supply chain is not just my raw materials or capital goods or my manufacturing and distribution footprint, but also the talent, right? The people and the need of those people and where they're going to be and where I'm going to deploy them. So I need in-depth visibility on that. And I also need to, you know, concentrate a little bit on the digital twin environment, right? How do I take that information, model my end-to-end supply chain, run hundreds, if not thousands of scenarios to mitigate risk, drive operational excellence, answer questions about, you know, the benefits of automation and things that you guys touched on. So I know I hit you with a lot there, but there's a lot going on at Intel.
Ravi, frankly, you and I need to spend more time together because you know what you're saying is exactly right. And you know, from our perspective and sort of music to my ears. I want to go to a couple of the questions. We got a lot of questions. So obviously somehow we've managed to keep people awake. So we got a bunch of questions here, but let me move to a couple of questions from our audience. You know, one of the things that COVID showed us was that our supply chain is broken. And for the first time, you know, we were hearing on the nightly news notions of supply chain. I mean, who the hell ever heard that? I mean, you know, I know you guys probably have the same experience I do, which is, you know, I'm very passionate about what we do. And so, you know, you go to a cocktail party, you're the last guy anybody wants to talk to because, you know, you get off talking about supply chain. So,
and Jonathan, you turn on the TV and you see Nick, right? So I mean, there goes supply chain. Yeah.
Right. Exactly right. I wrote an op-ed about 3 or 4 months ago when we were all struggling with ventilators. And the op-ed was, you know, we don't have a supply problem or manufacturing problem with ventilators. We just don't know where they are. We got a logistics problem. And the truth is we didn't know where they were. So COVID has shown us that we got to get better at moving stuff around. We got to be a lot better at it. But Randy, let me ask you, do you see a problem in the area of manufacturing? Do you see a trend for higher demand for manufacturing facilities, or are you guys solely focused on warehousing? Are you looking at other pieces of the industrial puzzle? Because you know, and you and I've had this discussion a lot. I mean, it's a nervous system, and all these things are so interrelated.
Manufacturing will never be a large percentage of our portfolio, just because we are focused on first-class logistics properties in the right locations that focus on the expansion of the retail supply chain and the e-commerce. So we will have certain facilities that we have long-term relations with great credit, and they will be doing manufacturing there, but it's not going to be a focus for us. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be a focus for other people, and that a lot of companies are going to build their own. A lot of manufacturers tend to own their own facilities, so they'll be building their own facilities because they invest a lot of money in them, which Jessup knows better than anyone. So like I say, I think it's not something we're going to focus on, but like I say, other people will, and big publicly traded international companies will, you know, focus on the expansion of that manufacturing base here in the United States using, you know, all the technology and wonderful machines that we have today that just increase productivity so much.
Thanks, Randy. Craig, let me ask you a question from the audience here. Will there be any changes with respect to strategies involving client customer acquisition for real estate after factoring in scenarios like this pandemic? You're on mute, Craig.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think the changes have already occurred. The allocations going towards industrial real estate have been going up. That's just going to be accelerated. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, it remains to be the preferred asset class. Look, the safest single investment in the world today is a 1 million square foot building, either leased by Jay or Kent in the Inland Empire for 10 years. You're seeing sovereign wealth money gravitating towards that. That's where that money's going. You see the creation of large scale portfolios the last 2 or 3 years with Prologis now, controlling over 1 billion square feet. Blackstone and their platform, Link Logistics, right up there with that. So the big just get bigger, and the money keeps coming in. There's insatiable demand, and that's going to continue. I mean, the biggest threat we have right now, and both Jay and Kent know this very well, is we're going to have a product shortage in about a year. You can forecast it. You can look and see what's in pipeline, what got delayed, what the amount of absorption will be, and it's in the middle of 2021. You can see it dropping off, and that will precipitate more build-to-suits, more people trying to take land down. There's a land rush going on right now across the country to find sites where you can build buildings on. Hopefully, some of the cities will get their act together and realize that this is job creation, and they're going to help make these things move along fairly quickly to get developed. But those are the things that I see. So to answer your question, is a continuing trend towards industrial real estate, and it's got long-term legs for the next 5 years.
Thanks, Craig. Here's another question. I'm going to direct this to Jay. During the pandemic, was there an increase in the number of digital platforms with respect to commercial real estate transactions? Did you see a greater dependence by your customers, Jay, on some forms of, I guess, digital intermediation or disintermediation?
In portions of the deal, obviously, not in initiating the deal and getting it done. I mean, because there's still a human factor involved. So, but obviously DocuSign and everything being done remotely, yes. But I don't think people were just typing in big building in Ontario into their computer and doing the deal entirely digital, if that makes sense. It's headed towards, your platform, Warehouse Exchange, is getting more and more traction, and that will become, I think it's a reality and becoming more and more viable, or a bigger reality as this goes on.
Yeah, I know, Jay. We've talked about this. I mean, you hear from Ravi that that on demand, for example, smaller space, shorter term, that there is a market for that. There are people that go out and try to rent 600 pallet positions for 4 months. I mean, call your local broker. They hang up the phone, right? So there is a do you see that place for? I mean, the only way you can do that is digitally, because the intermediary can't really afford it. You call up for 600 pallet positions, and the broker says, well, hell, that's my commission is $720. I can't return the phone call.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Ravi. Ravi, I see you smiling there.
Yeah, it just, when I was on the service provider side, I was looking at kind of the big chunk and the aggregated spending and portfolio. So I would have historically not looked at, the on-demand, the short-term projects, right? For that exact reason, you're not incentivized to do so. But there's a lot of need for project-based warehousing. There's short-term needs. There's pop-ups. You have a lot of folks doing construction. They need construction storage, short-term laydown support. Marketing peripherals that are all over the country, if not the world, kind of like the non-core storage, right? So the core storage, I'm probably going to optimize within my network and my footprint to manage my risk. But why the heck would I have brochures and shovels and whatever, right? Taking up valuable real estate. And those things, there's a lot of variability there. So I think, for the service providers out there, especially the ones that are playing in the on-demand space, there's sizable spending in that area, right? And that's something that I think will grow as those service providers build their capabilities to be able to meet the industrial manufacturer or the large enterprise customer needs.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at you look at companies like Shopify, 850,000 customers. You look at Etsy, 2.5 million customers. There's some stuff going on out there, and those folks want to touch their own inventory. I know that with us on our 3PL side, I mean, if you call our 3PL and say, you want to touch your inventory, the guy lights his hair on fire. You can't come in our building. You can't touch your inventory. But I think there is demand out there for people who want to, they're smaller companies maybe, and they want to do something with their inventory. They want to do some material handling. On the 3PL side, 75% of our revenues are generated from material handling. So it's a little bit different.
That's the disconnect.
Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Well, that's the disconnect. You've got the operator in Randy, okay, and Randy wants a stabilized asset that becomes a bond, for lack of a better term. So he just wants to clip that coupon. The provider, in your case, Taylor, you want to try to marry up your customer's term with the term of the warehouse, and there lies the disconnect, because Randy wants a 5 or a 10-year lease, and you want a 2 or a 3 to provide optimum flexibility. So that's the issue in an operation like warehouse.
Oh, we lost Ken. Well, Randy's Randy's probably a bad example, because we know what Randy wants. I mean, Randy's up in Montana and on his ranch, the fly fishing, and yeah, he wants to sell a building and have a 30-year or 20-year revenue stream so he can clip coupons.
Yeah, but that is the disconnect. Now in Ravi's case, you have a lot of that non-traditional that really falls into that category, right? The laydown space, the construction debris. I mean the construction equipment stuff and whatnot. So, that is the emerging trend, and that's where I think there'll be a more reliance on technology, the AI and the machine learning that's going to drive the Jessups, the Ravis to some of these conclusions.
Yeah, as I say, there is this real confluence. I mean, we're working with our friends at Esri, I mean, they're sort of the leading supplier of geospatial information, and there really is that confluence of understanding the data. Craig, we're lucky to have you on the panel here, and I wanted to ask you, you have that global view because you have some, you have oversight of some of your European operations. Do you see a difference in your customers here in the US? Are we behind Europe? Are we in front of Europe in terms of trends?
No, I would say no. I look, in terms of tenant demand, no, it's real similar. The biggest taker of space in Germany today is Amazon. The biggest taker of space in France is Amazon. And the biggest taker of space in the UK is Amazon. So there you go. Little bit different ways than they proceed. Very different in Asia. There is no Amazon in China. It's Alibaba. And so they don't have market dominance in that space. Australia is an interesting country, smaller than California, but feels like California in 1968, very local in nature. The things that are really interesting when you think about globally is that the same players are everywhere. The same occupants are taking space, the same big Prologises and the Lynx and Blackstones are all operating the same theaters. So that's, to me, is interesting. The thing you'll see beginning to see is a shift out of manufacturing out of China into Southeast Asia. That will change some of the shipping patterns. It'll now go through the Suez Canal versus coming in the Port of Los Angeles. And for the first time ever, East Coast port market share has increased over West Coast. So I think those are things that are happening.
What do,
this
you
is
see,
a,
what do you see as a result of that? Like, I mean, why is that pattern shifting from gateways on the West Coast to gateways on the East Coast?
because as you go into Vietnam and India, you go up the Suez. I mean, it's pretty simple. As you shift that line over west, amazingly enough, in the Far East, if you go west,
Yeah.
you're going to be going in through Europe. I mean, you go out of that's how the shipping patterns are. Secondarily, with the widening of the canal, the long-term effect was if you're sending at least forecastable product. So in other words, low-cost product that you can send it. You got to remember, and everybody here knows, it's the least expensive way to send something is maritime, followed by rail, and then by truck. So if you could forecast a holiday season, you can send a great big, 18 million square foot TEU ship with the Panama Canal to hit the East Coast ports, and that's a cheaper way to do it. It's slower, but cheaper. So
Well, to that point,
come back to the,
I learned as a result of my, I sit on the MITSNAC, the Marine Transportation Advisory Committee, and I learned when I was there that 95% of our inventory in the U.S. travels by water. 95%.
Well, just to wrap it up, you have to begin looking at tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers to the manufacturers in China. So it's not as simple as people want to say, hey, let's just move it or repatriate it, because their suppliers are coming from somewhere. But so I would say, look, real similar to what we see in the U.S. Some nuances to it, but pretty similar.
Great. Well, listen, I really want to thank you guys for participating and preparing for this, and having our discussion today. I mean, everybody's been terrific, and other than my bad introduction for Craig, which I will pay dearly for, I'm sure that's going to cost me a lot of money. But anyway, so I thank you all for participating, and if anybody has any questions in the audience, you can direct them to me, and I'll get them to the appropriate panelists. So go forth and prosper. And let's innovate. We have to. There you go. Okay.
Guys, thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.